This will be my story for teens. It is my account of a brush with an urban legend. It was some 10 years ago. I was driving home after an evening out with my friends. It was well after midnight, blistering cold outside, and much darker than usual due to the new moon. I was hurrying home because my curfew was fast approaching and I didn't want to get in trouble, but also I was so tired. I was turning onto Archer when I saw her. She was about 50 yards down the road, dressed in a white dress and red shoes. As I got closer, I saw her hair was blonde and it was cut into this old-fashioned sort of hairstyle. Despite the cold of the night, she had only a cardigan on for warmth, but the temperature didn't seem to bother her. In fact, nothing seemed to bother her, or more so, nothing seemed right about her. She was alone, and she was walking very strangely, arms straight and stiff at her side, head held high, slow and steady paces forward. Now, I'm not the kind of person that picks up hitchhikers, especially hitchhikers that are walking in a really strange way, but it was after midnight, it was cold, it was dark, she was alone, and she couldn't have been more than 17 years old. So I decided I would at least make sure that she was okay. I slowed my car and pulled in next to her, rolled down my window. "Are you okay?" I said. She didn't respond, just kept walking in that odd way down the road. I tried again. "Hello, are you okay?" This time she seemed to hear me, and she stopped walking, stiffly turned towards me, and said, "I'm okay, thank you." And then she kept walking. Now I really wanted to know what was going on, because despite the girl saying she was okay, she didn't seem like she was okay. So I pulled forward a little bit more. "Do you want to ride somewhere?" I asked her. She stopped again, but this time she walked all the way over to my car and looked inside, and looked at me and said, "Yes, thank you." I unlocked the door, and she got inside, sat down, and placed her hands in her lap and looked out the window. She seemed to be waiting for something, but she needed to put her seatbelt on before we were going anywhere. "Do you want to put your seatbelt on?" I asked. She didn't seem to hear me the first time, so I said again, "Hey, can you put your seatbelt on?" I pulled on my own seatbelt as if to emphasize the point. She looked at me then, and she had this look of confusion in her face. It seemed like she'd never heard of the word or seen a seatbelt before in her life. "Your seatbelt," I pointed. She looked over her shoulder, and she could see the belt then. She grabbed it with one hand and pulled it slowly out, but she didn't buckle it in. "The buckle's there," I said. I was starting to get a little bit weirded out now. I picked up this girl in the middle of the night, and she didn't know what a seatbelt was? It was a little bit too late to kick her out of the car now, but I kind of wanted to at this point in time. She clicked her seatbelt in, and this look of relief passed over her face for the briefest of moments. She then went back to looking out the windshield, hands in her lap. "I'm Marcia," I said. "Mary," she responded. "Do you want to tell me where you live?" I asked. "I'll tell you where to go," she said. Okay. I started the car, and I began to drive. I was filled with regret over my decision of bringing this girl into my car. The way she sat, the way she talked, it was all a bit off. It got even stranger when we started to pass Resurrection Cemetery. She turned, now, and looked out the passenger window. I could see her head moving back and forth ever so slightly as she saw a gravestone, watch it disappear into the dark before finding another. She seemed fixated and fascinated by this place, and she didn't say a word. She didn't even seem to be breathing. until we were completely past the cemetery. She then turned and looked back out the front of the car. So, do I need to turn anywhere? I asked. Yes, up there, she said, pointing to the road. I turned. The silence in the car was beginning to be a little bit jarring, so I decided to try and make some conversation. What were you doing out there? It's so late, it's so cold. Oh, I'd been out with my boyfriend, but we had a fight. Okay, I said, and the conversation died. I drove for a few more minutes before she pointed to a house up on the corner. That one's mine. I have to say, I felt a little bit of relief at this point in time. I was going to be able to get this girl out of my car. I pulled over, stopped the car. Thank you, she said. She exited the car, closed the door, walked to the house, opened, and passed through. I began to pull away once I saw her close the door behind her. I was getting close to curfew now, and I knew I had to hurry home, but a few blocks later I saw Mary had left her cardigan in my car. I decided that it would be best to just drop it off the next morning. So that's what I did. The next day I drove back to Mary's house. I walked up and I knocked on the door. Now, I expected Mary or maybe Mary's mother or father to answer the door, but instead this very, very old woman opened the door. Hello? Hi, yeah, I gave Mary a ride home last night. This is her cardigan. She left it in my car. At this point in time, the woman froze. Her mouth dropped open and her eyes went wide. She seemed to be in some sort of state of shock. Her trembling hands reached out and grabbed onto the cardigan, and she brought it back toward her, staring at it, still with her mouth open in disbelief. I'm sorry, do you know Mary? I asked. Mary? Yes, the woman said. Okay, are you all right? Tears had started to form in her eyes now. Yes, Mary was my sister. What do you mean was? I asked. Well, she said, Mary was hit by a car 75 years ago. She's been buried in Resurrection Cemetery ever since. And that's how I gave a ride home to Resurrection Mary.